The groom slapped the bride's daughter at the wedding. What happened next shocked everyone. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from. Camille Parker's life was a delicate balancing act, a constant juggle between career and motherhood. 35 years old, sharp-minded and resilient, she had built a solid career in marketing while raising her 10-year-old daughter, Amira, on her own. Camille had long since traded dreams of romance for the practicalities of single parenthood. Her heart had been hardened by her past, a painful divorce from Jason, a man who had once promised her forever but left her with scars both seen and unseen. Now, her world revolved around Amira, her greatest source of joy and strength. Their two-bedroom apartment wasn't large, but it was filled with warmth. The kitchen always smelled of vanilla from Camille's weekend baking sessions, and the living room, cluttered with Amira's books and art supplies, felt like a haven. Amira, with her soft curls and wide, observant eyes, was the center of Camille's universe. She was a quiet child, more comfortable with her sketchpad and books than with other kids. Camille often found her writing in her journal, a little pink notebook with a heart-shaped lock where she poured her thoughts. Camille's social life was minimal by choice. Apart from occasional brunches with her best friend Nicole, she rarely stepped out for anything beyond work or errands. Nicole, ever vibrant and opinionated, often urged her to start dating again. "You've spent years pouring everything into Amira and your career," she would say. "You deserve something for yourself, too." Camille would always brush her off with a chuckle. "Love's not on the menu, Nick. I've got a full plate as it is." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The night of the charity gala was one she hadn't planned on attending. Her boss had insisted, something about networking and making the company look good. So Camille found herself standing in a sleek navy blue dress, her natural curls framing her face, a glass of champagne in hand. The gallery was filled with polished smiles and art pieces that felt cold despite their price tags. She had wandered from room to room, her eyes glazing over abstract canvases, counting down the minutes until she could slip away unnoticed. And then, him. He appeared by her side seemingly out of nowhere. "Modern art," he said, his voice smooth and laced with amusement. "A celebration of confusion." Camille turned, her brows lifting. Beside her stood a tall man with neatly styled sandy blonde hair and a tailored charcoal suit. His eyes were a striking shade of blue, and his smile carried a hint of mischief. "You don't sound like a fan," she replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "Oh, I appreciate the effort," he said, his eyes crinkling slightly. "But I've always been more drawn to things that tell a story. Something with heart, not just brushstrokes." The conversation unfolded effortlessly from there. He introduced himself as Andrew Bishop, an entrepreneur with a passion for art and philanthropy. They exchanged stories, hers of motherhood and career, his of business ventures and travels. He listened to her with a kind of attentive curiosity that felt rare. When she mentioned Amira, there was no flicker of hesitation, no subtle shift in demeanor that she had come to expect from men who learned she had a child. Instead, he asked, "What's she like?" Camille found herself painting a picture of Amira, her love for reading, her clever observations, and her sharp sense of humor. Andrew smiled warmly. "She sounds incredible. You must be proud." "I am," Camille replied, and for a moment her heart felt unexpectedly light. By the end of the evening, Andrew had asked if he could see her again. For the first time in years, Camille felt a flicker of excitement. Against her usual instincts, she said yes. Their first official date was at a cozy Italian bistro. The setting was intimate, with soft music and the rich aroma of fresh pasta. Conversation flowed effortlessly, and Camille found herself laughing more than she had in a long time. Andrew was charming without being overbearing, confident but not arrogant. He asked about her goals, her dreams, and most surprisingly, about Amira. "She's a huge part of my life," Camille said, her voice steady but guarded. "As she should be," Andrew replied. "I'd like to meet her when you feel it's right." Camille's chest tightened at the words. She had introduced Amira to someone only once before, and the outcome had been disappointing, but something in Andrew's sincerity made her believe he meant it. The meeting happened on a breezy Saturday afternoon at the park. Amira was quiet, her sketchpad tucked under her arm, her eyes studying Andrew from a distance. He greeted her with a warm, easy smile and offered her a book. One Camille had mentioned was on her daughter's reading list. Amira took the book, her fingers brushing over the cover. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice polite but guarded. They spent the afternoon together, Andrew asking about Amira's favorite subjects, listening as she talked about her love for art and stories. He didn't push when she withdrew, didn't overwhelm her with forced conversation. By the end of the day, Amira hadn't warmed to him, but she hadn't rejected him either. "She's shy," Camille said later as they walked to their cars. "She's smart," Andrew replied. "She's watching, listening. I'd be the same way if someone new came into my mom's life." Camille's heart softened. Few men understood the protective bond between a mother and child, but he did, or at least he seemed to. Weeks turned into months, and Andrew became a steady presence. He brought small, thoughtful gifts for Amira, an art set here, a bookmark there. He made a point to join them for weekend brunches, and even helped Amira with a school project once. Yet, Amira remained reserved, her interactions careful and measured. She never ran to him with excitement, never sought his attention the way she did with Nicole or her teachers. Camille noticed it, but she told herself it was just Amira's nature. Her daughter had always been cautious with new people. With time, Camille believed, the walls would fall, but what Camille didn't see, what only the pages of Amira's journal knew, was the unease that sat beneath her daughter's silence. In Amira's neat, slanted handwriting, a single line stood out among her daily entries. "He's nice to Mom, but when he looks at me, his smile stops at his eyes." The sun bathed the weekend in golden warmth as Camille and Amira packed their overnight bags for their first trip to Andrew's lake house. Camille felt a flutter of excitement. This was a step forward, a blending of their lives, something she hadn't dared to hope for in years. The drive was smooth, and Amira, nestled in the back seat with her sketchpad, stayed mostly silent, offering only short responses when Camille tried to include her in the conversation. When they arrived, the lake house was stunning. 2 stories of glass and cedar wood overlooking a serene stretch of water that sparkled in the afternoon sun. It was modern, pristine, and felt more like a luxury retreat than a home. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged, almost as though it were staged for a magazine. Amira's eyes scanned the space with the same careful observation she gave to new books, noting the cold symmetry of the furniture and the absence of anything personal. No photos, no warmth. Andrew greeted them with his usual charm, showing them around. He had prepared a guest room for Amira, complete with a set of colored pencils and a fresh sketch pad, and Camille smiled at his thoughtfulness. Amira, however, only gave a quiet thank you before retreating to the room. Dinner was pleasant at first. Andrew cooked while Camille helped, their laughter filling the air. Amira sat at the counter, drawing quietly until her elbow knocked over her glass, sending a trail of water across the polished granite. She immediately reached for a napkin, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Andrew's voice cut through the warm air, sharper than before. "Careful, Amira." His tone was firm, not loud, but it carried something cold that made the girl's hands falter for a second. Camille, sensing the shift, quickly smiled and brushed it off. "It's just water, Andrew. No harm done." Andrew's lips curved into a smile as he met Camille's eyes. "Of course. Just teaching a little mindfulness." He ruffled Amira's curls lightly, but the girl's body tensed under his touch. That night, Amira appeared at Camille's bedroom door, her sketchpad hugged to her chest. "Can I sleep here with you?" she asked softly. Camille was surprised. Amira hadn't made that request in years. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Amira nodded quickly, but her eyes didn't meet her mother's. "The room's too big. It feels strange." Camille's heart melted. "Of course, baby. Come here." She lifted the covers and Amira slid in beside her, small and warm. As the girl drifted off to sleep, Camille's fingers brushed through her curls, her heart a mix of comfort and confusion. Something felt off, but she couldn't quite place it. In the morning, Amira was back to her usual quiet self, and the unsettling moment faded into the background. Weeks passed, and Andrew's presence in their lives grew. He joined them for brunches, offered to pick Amira up from school if Camille was running late, and even helped Amira with a school project on local ecosystems. His contributions felt generous, but Amira remained distant. Camille started to feel frustrated. She wanted them to connect, to form the bond she had dreamed of. But no matter how hard Andrew tried, Amira kept him at arm's length. The tension between them began to surface more often. Once, during dinner at Andrew's condo, Amira accidentally knocked her fork to the floor. Andrew, in the middle of a story, paused abruptly. "Pick it up," he said. Amira slid off her chair to grab it, but as she reached, the fork slipped from her fingers and clattered again. Andrew's voice, cold and precise, came again. "I said, pick it up." Camille's brows knitted together. "Andrew, it's not a big deal. She's got it." Andrew smiled then, but it was tight. "I'm just teaching her responsibility. Children should learn to handle small tasks without clumsiness." The comment settled uneasily between them. Amira's eyes stayed down, and the joy of the evening drained from the room. Later that night, in the privacy of their apartment, Camille tucked Amira into bed and smoothed her hair. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "do you like spending time with Andrew?" Amira hesitated. Her fingers twisted the corner of her blanket. "He's okay." Camille waited, sensing more behind the pause. "It's all right to tell me how you feel." Amira's lips pressed together, then, after a long silence, she said, "He's nice, but sometimes he looks at me like I'm in his way." Camille felt something shift inside her. The words, so small, carried a weight that pressed against her chest. "Baby, you're never in anyone's way, and if you ever feel uncomfortable, you tell me. Promise?" Amira nodded, but the shadow in her eyes lingered. That night, Camille lay awake, replaying the moments in her head, the sharpness in Andrew's tone, the stiffness in Amira's body when he touched her shoulder. But then, she remembered his kindness, his patience, how he supported her and wanted to be part of their lives. He was trying, wasn't he? It was just an adjustment period. Amira was cautious, always had been. The next weekend, they went to a family picnic organized by Andrew's business partners. Camille noticed how Andrew introduced Amira. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, his voice smooth and composed. This is Camille's daughter, Amira." There was something clipped in the phrasing, as if Amira's connection was through Camille alone, not through him. During the games, Amira tripped and scuffed her knee. As Camille rushed to her side, Andrew's voice came low and quick. "Shake it off, kid. You're fine." Amira's lip trembled, but she stood up without a word, brushing dirt from her jeans. Camille's gaze flicked to Andrew, something uneasy curling in her chest. But he was already laughing with his colleagues, his polished mask back in place. That evening, when they returned home, Amira disappeared into her room without a word. Later, as Camille tidied up, she noticed Amira's journal lying slightly open on the bed. A glimpse of a single sentence stopped her breath. "I feel like he only likes me when I'm invisible." The words struck her harder than she expected. Camille closed the journal carefully, a knot tightening in her stomach. She decided to talk to Nicole the next day. Over coffee, she relayed the incidents, the stern corrections, Amira's reluctance, the strange comment from the picnic. Nicole's expression hardened, her usual warmth cooling into sharp concern. "Camille," she said carefully, "kids have a sixth sense about people. If Amira feels something's off, you need to listen." "He's just trying to help me parent," Camille argued, though her voice wavered. "He's from a different background. Maybe he's just stricter than I am, but he's never been cruel." Nicole's eyes pinned her in place. Strict is one thing, cold is another, and a man who sees a child as a problem, that's a warning sign. Camille felt her defenses rise, a flicker of irritation sparking. "You've never liked him, Nicole. You're looking for flaws because you think I'm better off alone." Nicole's face tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "I don't care if I like him. I care if Amira's safe and happy. She's telling you how she feels. The question is, are you listening?" The conversation left Camille raw and unsettled. She loved and trusted Nicole, but wasn't this just another case of overprotectiveness? And yet, Amira's words stayed with her, circling her mind in the quiet hours of the night. The following week, Camille tried to be more observant. She watched how Andrew interacted with Amira. His corrections were always small but pointed. "Napkin on your lap, Amira. Sit up straight. Don't mumble." His tone was polished and polite but lacked warmth, like a teacher who tolerated a student rather than cared for them. One evening, Amira knocked over her glass during dinner. A small accident, but the tension that followed was palpable. Andrew's smile was tight, his eyes cool. "Another spill," he said softly, with a glint of something sharp beneath his words. Amira's hand trembled as she reached to clean it up, her shoulders drawn tight. Camille felt the moment crystallize, the cold air, the stiffness in her daughter's small frame. It was a moment that begged her to see clearly, but the doubt, the uncertainty, and the longing for this relationship to be good, to be right, clouded her vision. As the night deepened, Camille kissed Amira good night, brushing a curl from her forehead. "I love you, baby girl, so much." Amira's voice was small as she whispered back, "I know, Mom." When Camille returned to her own bed, her heart felt heavy with questions she didn't want to ask. The restaurant glowed with soft amber light, the clink of glasses and murmur of conversation weaving into a warm, intimate hum. Camille felt the tension in her shoulders loosen as she sat across from Andrew, the rich aroma of garlic and fresh basil from their pasta lingering between them. He had chosen the place carefully, an elegant, secluded spot with a view of the city skyline, all shimmering lights against the night sky. Camille sipped her wine and smiled, allowing herself for once to simply enjoy the moment. Andrew's eyes, steady and intent, never left her. "You've been working so hard lately. I thought you deserved a night where you didn't have to be anything but yourself." Camille's lips curved. "You mean not a boss, a mother, and a problem solver all at once?" He chuckled. "Exactly. Just Camille. Beautiful, brilliant Camille." Her heart warmed at his words, and for a moment she let herself believe that happiness, this kind of happiness, could be hers again. As the dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate soufflé with a dusting of powdered sugar, Andrew's hand reached across the table, covering hers. His touch was warm, his thumb brushing lightly against her knuckles. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," he said, his voice suddenly deeper, more measured. "About us. About you, me, and Amira." Camille's heart skipped, her breath catching as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a ring. A single, stunning diamond, classic and timeless. "Camille," he said, his voice soft but firm, "will you marry me?" The world seemed to pause, the sounds of the restaurant fading into the background. Camille's chest felt tight, and her thoughts raced, images of Amira, of their life, of the journey that had brought her here. She saw the cautious joy in Andrew's eyes, the silent question waiting there. She saw, too, her own reflection in the polished diamond, a woman who had fought for everything she had, who had stood alone for so long. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper wrapped in the tremor of hope. "Yes." Andrew's face broke into a wide, elated smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The room, the people, everything beyond this moment dissolved. It was just them, and the promise of a future she hadn't dared to dream of. When she told Amira the next morning, she tried to infuse her voice with excitement. She sat beside her daughter on the couch, her hand brushing over Amira's curls. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "Andrew asked me to marry him, and I said yes." Amira was silent. Her fingers, small and careful, traced patterns on her pajama pants. "So, he's going to live with us?" "Yes," Camille said softly. "After the wedding, we'll live together. We'll be a family." Amira's eyes flicked up briefly, searching her mother's face, then dropped again. "Okay." The single word, so flat, so devoid of any feeling, pierced Camille's heart. She expected surprise, maybe confusion, but the hollowness in Amira's voice felt like something else, like a wall going up. "Baby," Camille pressed, "are you all right?" Amira nodded once but didn't meet her gaze. "Yeah, I'm fine." But Camille felt the tightness in the space between them, the air suddenly fragile and cold. She wanted to ask more, but a knot of fear of the answer, kept her from pushing. She told herself it was a big change. Amira just needed time. In the days that followed, wedding preparations consumed Camille's life. She was swept up in meetings with planners, selecting venues, and finalizing guest list. Andrew, ever the organizer, took charge of most of the details. He was efficient, decisive. When Camille suggested a smaller, more intimate wedding, Andrew persuaded her otherwise. "This is a celebration of us," he said. "We deserve something grand." When she mentioned inviting Nicole, his expression flickered just for a second. "Are you sure?" he asked smoothly. "Nicole's been distant. I wouldn't want any negativity on our special day." Camille paused, the subtle thread in his words winding tight around her chest. "Nicole's my best friend," she said carefully. "Of course," he replied quickly, his smile returning, polished and perfect. "Invite whoever you want. It's your day." But the seed was planted, a whisper of doubt wrapped in understanding. He didn't like Nicole. And maybe, just maybe, that was why she had felt herself pulling back from her friend, drifting on a current she hadn't realized was moving. The weeks passed, and the air between Amira and Andrew grew thinner, stretched tight by something unseen but felt. Amira's distance became more pronounced. She no longer lingered when he entered a room, no longer offered small conversation or polite smiles. She withdrew into a room more often, her journal her only companion. One night, as Camille folded laundry, she found a small slip of paper that had fallen from the journal's pages. Her eyes, unbidden, scanned the words in Amira's handwriting. "Mom loves him. So why do I feel so alone?" The sentence struck her, a cold fist around her heart. Camille felt the familiar war between instinct and logic begin its battle. She wanted to ask Amira, wanted to shake loose whatever fear or sadness clung to her daughter, but the exhaustion of planning, of hoping, of wanting this to work, weighed her down. Instead, she knocked softly on Amira's door. "Baby," she called, "can I come in?" Amira's voice came muffled, barely there. "I'm tired, Mom. Can we talk tomorrow?" Camille's hand rested on the doorframe, her throat tight. "Okay," she whispered. "Tomorrow." But tomorrow never seemed to come. The tension spilled over one evening during the final dress fitting. Camille stood before the mirror, the ivory lace hugging her figure, the veil soft against her curls. She felt beautiful, hopeful. Amira sat on a small couch nearby, her sketchpad in her lap. The boutique was quiet, only the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of fabric. Camille turned toward her daughter with a gentle smile. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Amira's gaze lifted briefly from her drawing. "You look pretty," she said softly, but there was no joy, no excitement, just a distant politeness, a formality that had taken root where ease had once been. Before Camille could speak, Andrew's voice broke the space. "Amira," he said, his tone sharp but calm, "sit up straight. You're slouching." The sudden command, so out of place in the gentle, sacred air of the moment, made Camille's brows draw together. She saw the flicker in Amira's eyes. Quick, barely there, a flash of something too familiar. Amira's back straightened immediately, her shoulders tense, her fingers curling tightly around the edge of her sketchpad. Camille's voice was soft but laced with steel. "Andrew, it's just a dress fitting. She's fine." Andrew's smile appeared, quick and smooth, a reflex. "Of course, just teaching a little posture. It's important." Amira's gaze stayed down, her body coiled tight as a spring, and Camille, in that instant, felt it, the cold undercurrent she had been pushing aside, something unspoken, something that didn't belong. That night, as Camille tucked Amira into bed, she sat on the edge of the mattress and smoothed her daughter's hair. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "do you want to tell me what's bothering you?" Amira hesitated, her small hand twisting the corner of the blanket. "Do we have to live with him?" The question, raw and vulnerable, made Camille's chest ache. "What's wrong, baby?" Amira's voice was barely above a whisper. I like it when it's just us." Camille's throat tightened. She wanted to wrap her daughter in reassurance, to promise her that everything would be okay. "I know, sweetheart," she said gently, "but I believe this will be good for us, for all of us. You'll have your own room, your own space, and he wants to take care of us." Amira's lips pressed together, her voice small and uncertain. "But I don't want him to be my dad." Camille's heart fractured, the honesty in those words cutting through every defense she had built. She cupped Amira's cheek, her thumb brushing across soft skin. "No one will ever replace your dad, baby. and you'll always have me, no matter what." Amira didn't argue, but as her eyes closed and sleep took her, Camille felt no peace. She sat there long after, listening to the soft rhythm of her daughter's breath, her chest tight with the weight of all the things she wasn't saying. Camille slipped from the room and found herself in the living room, sinking onto the couch. She stared down at the diamond on her finger, the reflection of a promise that felt suddenly heavy. And somewhere, buried beneath the hope, a whisper of doubt stirred. The weeks leading up to the wedding became a whirlwind that consumed Camille's every waking moment. The venue was booked, the invitations sent, the menu selected. Andrew's efficiency was both a blessing and, at times, a quiet storm. He had opinions on everything: the flower arrangements, the guest list, even the playlist. His decisiveness was a comfort at first, but soon Camille began to feel like a passenger in her own wedding. Each time she voiced a preference, he would smile and reason her into his choice, always with logic so polished it felt impossible to argue against. When she suggested incorporating Amira more into the ceremony, perhaps as a flower girl or given a reading, Andrew had paused, his lips pressed together in a thin line before he smoothed his expression. "She's shy," he said. "We shouldn't put her on the spot. It's our day, Camille. Let's keep it simple." Camille felt the protest rise, then falter. "You're right," she said, though her voice was thin. "No pressure on her." But that night, as she tucked Amira in, the girl's voice, soft and small, broke the silence. "Do I have to do anything at the wedding?" "No, sweetheart," Camille replied, brushing a curl from her forehead. "Just be there with me." Amira's shoulders loosened a fraction. "Good," she whispered. "I don't want to." The next day, the tension grew tighter. Andrew had taken charge of the rehearsal dinner guest list, and Camille discovered he had quietly removed Nicole from the invites. "You didn't invite Nicole?" Her voice was taut, confusion shading into something sharper. "I thought we agreed to keep it small," Andrew replied, his tone smooth but edged. "Nicole, she's always so critical. I didn't think you'd want her stirring things up before our big day." Camille felt her pulse quicken. "She's my best friend." "And I respect that," he said quickly, stepping forward to place his hands on her shoulders, his voice lowering into something soft and reasonable. "But don't you think she's been a little undermining? She questions everything about us. Is that what you want surrounding you on our happiest night?" Camille's chest tightened. She heard the logic in his words, felt it pressing against her doubts. Nicole had been distant because Camille had pushed her away. And wasn't that her choice? "Fine," she said, but the word tasted wrong in her mouth. That night, Amira appeared at her bedroom door again. "Can I sleep here with you?" Camille's heart pinched. "Baby, what's wrong?" Amira hesitated. I don't like his house. It feels cold." Camille's fingers paused mid-stroke through her daughter's curls. "It's just different. We'll make it ours, I promise." But the promise felt hollow, and Amira's small body, curled tightly beside her under the sheets, felt like a whisper of something unseen and urgent. The following weekend, during the final dress fitting, the thread that had been pulling tight began to fray. The boutique was serene, a soft hush of fabric against carpet and the distant hum of instrumental music. Camille stood before the mirror, the lace and satin of her gown pooling elegantly at her feet, the veil brushing her shoulders like a whisper. She felt beautiful, yes, but also distant from herself, as though watching someone else's story unfold. Amira sat on a nearby couch, her sketchpad open but untouched, her eyes following her mother's reflection rather than her own drawing. "You look pretty, Mom," she said softly, but her voice lacked its usual warmth. Before Camille could respond, Andrew's voice, measured and low, broke the space. "Amira," he said, his tone crisp as glass, "sit up straight. You're slouching." The air in the boutique shifted. Amira's back snapped straight immediately, her fingers tightening on the sketch pad until her knuckles blanched. Camille's body went rigid, her reflection suddenly sharp and too bright in the mirror. "Andrew," her voice was calm but firm, "it's just a fittin'. She's fine." Andrew's face was smooth, his lips forming the quick curve of a smile. "Of course," he said lightly, "just a habit. Posture is important. She should know that." Camille turned from the mirror, her eyes landing on her daughter. She saw the tension in Amira's small frame, the way her lips pressed into a thin line, and something inside her shifted, heavy and cold. That night, Camille sat beside Amira's bed, her fingers brushing through her daughter's curls as she often did to soothe her to sleep. But Amira was awake, her eyes wide and shadowed. "Sweetheart," Camille whispered, her voice soft but weighted, "do you want to tell me what's bothering you?" Amira's lips trembled, and her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Do we have to live with him?" The question, raw and uncertain, cut through Camille's chest like a blade. She swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "Why do you ask?" Amira's fingers twisted into the blanket, small and tense. I like it when it's just us." Camille felt her heart crack at the edges. She leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to Amira's forehead. "No one will ever come between us, baby," she whispered. "I promise you that." But as she left the room, her hands shaking at her sides, she felt the weight of something slipping, something she couldn't name, but knew was there, just beneath the surface. The next evening, Camille found herself in a rare argument with Andrew. It started small, about the wedding colors of all things, but his tone sharpened faster than she expected. "You're so indecisive," he said, his voice clipped. "We're days away from the wedding, Camille. I've handled everything because you keep second-guessing." Camille felt heat rise under her skin. "This is my wedding, Andrew. I should have a voice." His eyes flashed, something quick and cold, before he smoothed his expression. "Of course," he said, his voice softening, almost apologetic. "I'm just trying to keep it perfect for you. For us." But Camille felt the shift. The apology felt hollow, and the crack, once hairline, widened. That night, Amira didn't wait for an invitation. She slipped into Camille's bed without a word, her small body pressed close. Camille's arms wrapped around her daughter tightly, her eyes staring into the dark. And in the silence, the whisper of something unspoken finally reached her. Something was terribly wrong. The morning broke clear and golden, sunlight spilling through the tall windows of the bridal suite. The room smelled faintly of roses from the sprawling arrangements lining every surface, creamy whites and soft blushes, perfect and delicate, just as Andrew had insisted. Camille stood before the full-length mirror, the final touches of her makeup fresh and glowing. The wedding gown, a cascade of lace and satin, hugged her figure, and the long veil settled like a whisper against her shoulders. She should have felt joy, excitement, that breathless anticipation every bride dreams of. But all she felt was tightness, a pressure beneath her ribs that no amount of deep breathing could ease. A soft knock on the door broke the fragile stillness, and Amira peeked in, dressed in a small black suit that made her look older, too polished, too stiff. Camille's lips softened into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You look so grown up, baby, like a star." Amira's gaze flicked to the dress, then back to her mother's face. "You look like a queen," she said softly, but her voice carried none of the warmth the words deserved. Camille knelt, gathering Amira's small hands in her own, her chest tightening at the coolness of the little palms she had known since they were tiny fists gripping her finger. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Amira hesitated, her lips parting and closing, then, finally, a whisper. "Do we have to live with him?" The question, fragile and sharp, struck straight through Camille's chest. She felt the air leave her, the weight of every unanswered question, every brushed-off instinct crashing into her at once. "Amira," her voice was soft, uncertain, "it's going to be good for us, for you. You'll have your own room, your own space. He wants to take care of us." Amira's voice, small but urgent, cut through her reasoning. "I don't want him to be my dad." The simplicity of it, the rawness, broke something in Camille. She felt her pulse quicken, her heart pounding in her throat. She wanted to say more, to promise, to soothe, but a new knock at the door, brisk and controlled, stole the moment. A voice followed, one of the coordinators. "5 minutes, Mrs. Parker." Camille's heart thudded. She pressed a kiss to Amira's forehead, lingering, her voice barely a whisper. "No matter what, you'll always have me." The ceremony unfolded like a scene from a dream. The garden was alive with soft music and the murmur of guests dressed in their finest, seated beneath a canopy of twinkling lights. The flowers, the silk runners, the golden chairs, all a perfect masterpiece of elegance. At the altar, Andrew stood tall in his black tuxedo, his expression composed, polished, a man who controlled every detail of his world. His eyes found hers as she walked down the aisle, and his smile was precise, practiced, a reflection of perfection. Camille's heart pounded with each step. Her dress felt heavier than it should, her breath shallow. Her eyes flicked briefly to the front row, to Amira's small figure, her legs swinging slightly beneath the chair, her expression tight and watchful. The officiant's voice, smooth and practiced, carried through the hush. "If anyone has any objections, speak now or forever hold your peace." The air held stillness, but inside Camille something shifted, a crack deep within, a fissure she could no longer ignore. She felt the silence pressing, the weight of expectation coiling around her throat, but she said nothing. The ceremony continued. The words, vows meant to bind forever, slipped from her lips, but they felt distant, hollow. She felt Andrew's ring slide onto her finger, and when she placed hers on his hand felt cold beneath the gold. Applause rose as they kissed, a brush of lips, soft, fleeting. But Camille felt no warmth, only the press of something wrong, something unseen but present, threading between them. The reception was a glittering spectacle. Laughter and conversation swirled beneath the high ceilings of the estate's grand ballroom. Champagne glasses clinked, and the polished notes of the string quartet floated through the air. Camille moved through the sea of guests, her gown trailing behind her, her smiles practiced and effortless. She felt like a spectator in her own life, watching the scene unfold but untethered from it. She caught sight of Amira by the dessert table, her small figure barely reaching the display. Amira reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of a cake plate, and then the sharp crack of glass shattering against the floor rang out, loud and sudden. The room fell into a stunned silence, conversations dying mid-sentence. All eyes turned. Amira stood frozen, her eyes wide, the remnants of a shattered dessert plate at her feet. The silence, for a heartbeat, was absolute, and then Andrew's voice, cold and low, sliced through the air. "Amira, he said, each syllable laced with quiet, coiled anger. "How many times have I told you to be careful?" Camille felt her breath stop, her body locking into place. She started forward, but the sound, sharp, swift, the unmistakable crack of palm against skin. Amira stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and something worse. Hurt, betrayal, fear. The bloom of a red mark rose fast on her small face. The room froze, the stunned gasps of guests a faint murmur against the roaring in Camille's ears. Everything stopped. Her vision blurred, tunneled until there was only Amira, her baby, her heart, hurt by him. The heat that rose inside her was swift and searing, a wave of fire that burned through every hesitation, every excuse, every lie she had told herself. She felt her body move before her mind caught up, her heels clicking against the polished floor, cutting through the horrified silence. She reached Amira, her hands cupping her daughter's face, her thumb brushing over the reddened cheek. Her voice, shaking with a fury that made her chest tight, broke through the silence. "You—" She rose, turning to Andrew, her voice low and shaking, a growl beneath every word. "You hit my child." Andrew's face shifted, a flicker of something, surprise perhaps, but not regret. His voice, smooth and cold, came as though the violence were nothing at all. "She was being careless. She needs discipline." "No!" Camille's voice cracked the air, raw and thunderous. Her body was taut, shaking, her heart pounding in her chest so hard it felt like it would break. "You don't get to touch her. You don't get to teach her. You don't get to hurt her." Her voice trembled, but it carried through the room with a force that shattered every fragile piece of the life she had tried to build. His eyes flashed, a flicker of something darker, control slipping from his grip. "Camille," he began, his voice lowering, tight with warning. "Don't make a scene." Her voice cut through his, slicing clean and hard. "You are the scene." She felt her chest heave, felt the pounding rush of her blood, but her voice did not waver. I see you now. You're nothing but a man who hides his ugliness behind a polished mask, and you thought I wouldn't see it until it was too late. But I see it now. I feel it now." The room held its breath, but Camille's voice rose, a weapon of truth. "You don't deserve to be my husband, and you sure as hell don't deserve to be anywhere near my child." A gasp rippled through the crowd, but it was distant, a whisper against the hurricane inside her. Andrew's face, cold and tight, shifted. His voice, a hiss, snapped low. "Camille, don't do this." But she was already turning, already gathering Amira into her arms, her heart a shield and her body a fortress. "Come on, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling, but her arms were strong. "We're done here." And then she was moving, her head high, her daughter safe against her chest, her heart hammering as she cut through the watching crowd. Eyes followed, whispers swirled, but Camille felt none of it. She felt only Amira's heartbeat against her own, felt the warmth of her daughter's trembling body in her arms. Behind her, the life she almost walked into crumbled, but ahead, there was something else. There was air. There was freedom. There was them. The night air was sharp and cold as Camille pushed through the towering iron gates of the estate, the muffled sounds of the wedding reception fading behind her. The heels of her shoes clicked against the paved driveway with quick, determined strikes. Her gown, once pristine and perfect, dragged through the damp gravel, but she didn't care. All she cared about was the warmth of Amira's trembling body pressed to her chest and the rapid, uneven beat of her daughter's heart. Amira's arms clung tightly around her neck, her face buried against Camille's shoulder, the fabric of the dress damp with tears. Camille felt the hitch in her daughter's breath, the tiny, broken gasps between sobs that made her own throat burn with a searing, helpless ache. They stopped beneath an old oak tree, its branches casting long, webbed shadows under the soft glow of the distant garden lights. Camille knelt, her gown pooling around her knees, and gently cupped Amira's face. The red mark on her daughter's cheek was stark even in the dim light, and Camille's fingers trembled as they brushed across it. Her voice, thick and raw, broke as she spoke. "Are you okay, baby?" Amira's lower lip wobbled, and her voice was a whisper, so soft it was nearly lost to the night breeze. "It just stings a little." Camille felt her chest crack wide open. She gathered Amira back into her arms, holding her so tightly she could feel the small shuddering breaths against her skin. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice fracturing. "I'm so sorry, baby." Amira's voice, small and muffled, broke her heart all over again. "I didn't mean to make him mad." Camille froze. Something inside her, something primal and furious, surged up so violently she tasted it, bitter and cold. She pulled back just enough to look into Amira's tear-streaked face, her own voice trembling but firm. "No," she said, her eyes burning. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. You hear me?" She cupped her daughter's cheeks, her thumbs brushing away the fresh tears that spilled freely. "He had no right. No right." A sound behind them, a soft scuff of footsteps on pavement, made Camille's body snap tight, her arms instinctively drawing Amira closer. She turned sharply, her heart pounding, ready to shield, to fight. But it wasn't Andrew. Nicole, her best friend, her face pale and tight with horror, her heels clicking quickly against the pavement as she rushed forward. "Camille?" Nicole's voice was raw, her eyes fixed on Amira's face, on the mark there that said everything. "Oh my God!" Camille's throat closed, her voice barely holding. "He hit her!" she choked out, her voice brittle with fury and anguish. "He hit my baby!" Nicole's expression shifted instantly. Horror replaced by something cold and protective, her hands clenching at her sides. She crouched beside them, her voice soft but laced with steel as she brushed Amira's curls gently. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice tender but tight with restrained anger. "Are you okay?" Amira nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "It just stings." Nicole's jaw tightened, but her voice softened even more as she glanced up at Camille. "Let's get you both out of here." Camille nodded once, a sharp, breathless motion. "Yes," she said, her voice low and tight. "Let's go." Nicole reached for Amira's bag, her voice steady and firm. "My car's parked just ahead." As they turned toward the lot, a voice, too familiar, too close, cut through the cold night air. "Camille?" Her blood turned to ice. She stopped, her body shielding Amira, and turned. "Andrew." He stood several feet away, his tuxedo still crisp, but his eyes burned with something cold and furious beneath his carefully controlled mask. His voice, low and sharp, carried through the space between them. "Don't walk away from me." Camille's body went rigid, every muscle coiled tight. She felt Amira tense, felt the sudden tremor return to her daughter's frame. Nicole's voice, cold and cutting, sliced through the air. "You've done enough." Andrew's eyes snapped to Nicole and something dark flickered across his face. "This isn't your business." Camille's voice, when it came, was low, taut, and vibrating with something that felt like the edge of breaking. "She's my child. You made it my business." His voice dropped into something cold, something almost dangerous. "She needs discipline. You coddle her, Camille. You always have." That's why she's soft." The words landed, but not the way he intended. They landed like fuel on fire. Camille felt something inside her snap. Her voice rose, shaken but sure, cutting through the night with all the force of everything she had held back for too long. "No, you don't get to decide what my daughter needs. You don't get to define her. You don't get to touch her." Her voice fractured, raw and burning, but her eyes were sharp and blazing. "You think strength is cruelty. You think control is power, but you are nothing. You are a man who hurts children and calls it teaching, a man who breaks instead of builds, and you," her voice sharpened, each word a blade, "you will never see her again." Andrew's face, so smooth, so controlled, twisted into something tight, something angry. "You're overreacting," he said, his voice low and warning. "You're emotional. Don't let one moment ruin everything." Nicole stepped between them, her voice cold and firm. "The only thing ruined here is your mask, Andrew." Camille's voice cut through again, her hand tightening protectively on Amira's back. "You showed me exactly who you are, and I should have seen it sooner. But now, I see you, clearly." Andrew's expression darkened, his control cracking at the edges. "You'll regret this." Camille's voice, low and fierce, carried the weight of every decision she had made and the certainty of the one she was making now. "The only thing I regret," she said, her voice cold and clear, "is not leaving sooner." Nicole's hand was on her arm, guiding her firmly toward the car. Camille didn't look back. She heard Andrew's voice, something sharp and cold and distant, but it was just noise. The only thing she felt was the warmth of Amira against her chest, the heartbeat that mattered more than anything. The car door closed, and the world outside dimmed into muffled silence. Amira's small body pressed close in the back seat, her fingers clutching the fabric of Camille's dress. As Nicole drove, the world outside slid past in a blur of headlights and shadows. The adrenaline, the rage, the fear, it all began to crash, wave after wave, and Camille's body shook with the aftershock. She felt Amira's hand slip into hers, and she gripped it tightly, holding her daughter's small fingers like a lifeline. Amira's voice, small but steady, broke the silence. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" Camille's voice, thick but certain, came without hesitation. "Yes, baby, we are. We will be." She felt Amira's fingers squeeze hers, and in that small gesture, in that simple, fragile trust, Camille felt something unshatterable form. A bond, forged in fire, untouchable and absolute. They pulled up to the familiar curb of their apartment building. The sight of it, the place that had been their world, their safe space, brought a fresh wave of emotion, but also a thread of something stronger. "Home?" Nicole turned to her, her voice soft but firm. "Do you want me to stay?" Camille's voice, though shaken, was steady. "No, you've done enough, more than enough." Her eyes met Nicole's, and in them, gratitude so deep it didn't need words. "Thank you for being here." Nicole's gaze, warm and fierce, held hers. "Always." Inside the apartment, Camille locked the door, once, twice, more for her heart than for security. She carried Amira to the couch, pulling the blanket over them both, the soft hum of the old heater filling the silence. Amira's voice, small and so trusting, broke the stillness. "Is he going to come here?" Camille's throat tightened, and her voice, low and firm, was a promise forged in steel. "No, baby. He's never coming near you again." Amira's small body softened, the tension finally releasing. "Okay," she whispered, her breath warm against Camille's collarbone. Camille felt the tears then, hot and silent, slipping down her cheeks. She held Amira closer, her lips pressing into soft curls. "You have nothing to be afraid of," she whispered. "Not anymore." And as Amira's breathing slowed, soft and steady, Camille felt it. The fierce, unshakable certainty that had replaced every doubt, every second guessing. No one would ever hurt her child again. Not while she drew breath. Not ever. The morning came with a dull, pale light that seeped through the curtains, casting a muted glow over the living room. Camille's body ached from the tension of the night, but her arms remained wrapped around Amira, who slept with her face pressed against her mother's chest. The girl's breathing was soft and steady, and for a moment, Camille didn't move. She stayed still, listening to the rhythm that meant everything. Amira's heartbeat, calm now, safe. The chaos of the wedding, the sharp crack of Andrew's hand, his cold, twisted voice, everything felt like a distant nightmare that hadn't fully lifted. But the sting of it was real. The mark on Amira's cheek, faint but still there, was real. The vibration of Camille's phone on the coffee table broke the fragile stillness. She shifted carefully, easing Amira onto the couch without waking her, and reached for the device. The screen flashed with notifications, calls, texts, mostly from numbers she didn't know. News traveled fast, but it was Nicole's name that she saw first, and without hesitation she answered, her voice low and raw from the night storm. "I'm here," Nicole said immediately, her voice steady but thick with concern. "Are you both okay?" Camille's throat tightened. She felt the sharp edge of exhaustion, but beneath it, something cold and burning. "We're home," she said, her voice rasping. "We're safe." Nicole's exhale crackled through the speaker, a sound heavy with both relief and restrained anger. "Good. You did the right thing, Camille. She paused, and Camille heard the shift in her tone, something tight and urgent. "Listen. You need to act quickly. The whole thing's spreading. People are talking. Some guests were recording. There's already a video of what he did online." Camille's heart, already bruised and raw, twisted with a new ache. She felt exposed, stripped bare, but then the ache sharpened, turned to something cold and fierce. Let them see. Let the world see him for what he was. She closed her eyes briefly, the whisper of her pulse steady in her ears. "I need a lawyer," she said, her voice flat with resolve. "Now." Nicole didn't hesitate. "I know someone. Anna Rodriguez. She's good. Family law, restraining orders, everything you'll need. I'll send you her number." Camille's fingers tightened around the phone. "Thank you, Nick, for everything." Nicole's voice softened but remained firm. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me you'll see this through." Camille's jaw set, her voice cold and certain. "I will." The call ended, and Camille felt the phone vibrate again with Nicole's follow-up, Anna Rodriguez's contact information. Without pausing, she tapped the number and waited, her fingers trembling slightly against the glass of the phone. A smooth, professional voice answered. "Anna Rodriguez speaking?" Camille's voice was tight, controlled, but the cracks beneath it were raw. "Miss Rodriguez, my name is Camille Parker. I need a restraining order. Immediately." The lawyer's voice, though professional, softened with understanding. "Let's start from the beginning, Miss Parker. Tell me everything." Camille's breath was shallow, but her words, once they began, spilled with cold clarity. She told Anna everything. How Andrew had come into their lives, the signs she had pushed down, the fear in Amira's voice, and then, finally, the slap, the moment the mask had shattered. Anna listened without interruption, her tone steady when she finally spoke. I'm so sorry you and your daughter went through this. The good news is that you're taking action immediately, given the public nature of what happened, and if there's video evidence, we can move quickly. I'll file for a temporary restraining order today. It will keep him away from both you and your daughter while we pursue something permanent." Camille's voice, though frayed, was hard with resolve. "Do it. I want him gone. I want him out of our lives forever." Anna's voice held the sharp edge of reassurance. "Consider it done. And if he tries to contact you, document everything. Every call, every message. If he shows up, call the police. You're not alone in this." Camille felt the tremor in her hand as she lowered the phone. She pressed her palm to her mouth, her breath shaken, and for the first time since the nightmare broke open, the tears came. Hot, silent, and searing. But beneath them, there was something harder, something that burned without breaking. Hours passed in a blur of paperwork and signatures. Anna worked fast, and by the afternoon, the temporary restraining order was filed and approved. The weight of that paper, so thin, so fragile, felt like a shield, and though it couldn't erase the fear, it stood between Andrew and her daughter. And that was everything. But Andrew didn't stay silent. The first text came before nightfall. His name flashed on her phone, the familiar number, and the sight of it sent a cold spike down her spine. She stared at the message, her fingers tightening until her knuckles went white. "You're making a mistake, Camille. Let's talk. Don't ruin everything over one moment." The next one followed minutes later, the cracks beneath his polished words starting to show. "You've embarrassed me. You don't understand what you're doing. Fix this." Camille felt her pulse quicken, her body humming with the urge to respond, to lash back, to scream. But Anna's voice rang clear in her mind. "Document everything. Do not engage." So she didn't reply. She saved the messages, screenshot after screenshot, and then blocked the number. But the next call came from an unknown number. And then another. Her voicemail, when she dared listen, was his voice. Low, tight, coiled with something sharp. "You think you're safe from me? You're not. You'll regret this, Camille." She felt the shiver crawl down her spine, but her hand was steady as she saved the recording and sent it directly to Anna. That night, every lock on her door clicked tight, and the curtains stayed drawn. Amira, sensing the shift, stayed close, her small body curled beside Camille on the couch, their heartbeats pressed together. In the morning, Camille met Anna in person. The lawyer was as sharp as her voice, dark hair pinned neatly back, eyes that missed nothing. She laid out the next steps with a clarity that felt like a roadmap through the chaos. "We'll move for a permanent order of protection," Anna said, her fingers sliding over the stack of collected evidence. "The videos that surfaced, the threats he's made, his contact attempts, it all strengthens your case. He won't be able to come near you or Amira." Camille's voice, though low, was edged with something fierce. "I don't just want distance. I want him gone from our lives." Anna's eyes met hers, calm and steady. "And that's exactly what we'll get." The days that followed were a tangle of motions, hearings, and statements. The video from the wedding spread further than Camille could control. Social media, news sites, public outrage blooming like wildfire. Strangers condemned him. Some, the sycophants he had surrounded himself with, tried to defend him. It was just a slap, a moment of frustration. But their voices drowned under the tide of others who saw the truth, a man who believed his control was power. Andrew's lawyer reached out with offers, Apologies, settlements, statements crafted to smooth his image. Camille refused them all. And then, silence. No more calls, no more messages. The quiet should have felt like peace, but Camille felt it like the edge of a blade waiting to fall. The hearing for the permanent order of protection came swiftly. Camille stood before the judge, her voice clear and steady as she told the truth. Every detail, every moment, every bruise, seen and unseen. She held Amira's hand through every word. Andrew was there, his face a mask of controlled fury, but his eyes burned. The order was granted without hesitation. That night, back in their apartment, Camille closed the door and felt the weight, months, years, finally fall from her shoulders. She turned, and Amira, standing in the soft pool of lamplight, looked up at her. "Is he gone now?" Amira asked softly. Camille's voice, though hoarse, was certain. "Yes, baby, he's gone." Amira's small, relieved breath broke the last thread in Camille's chest. She knelt, gathering her daughter into her arms, and for the first time since the nightmare began, she felt it. Safety. They stayed there, wrapped in the cocoon of their home, their bond, their freedom. And as the night deepened, Camille felt the fierce burn of something she had not allowed herself to feel fully. Hope. The morning broke softly, the pale sunlight painting the living room in gold and amber. The apartment was quiet, filled only with the gentle hum of life. Amira's steady breathing from the couch where she slept, the faint rustle of leaves against the window. Camille sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The steam had vanished, but she clung to the warmth it once held, her fingers tight, her knuckles pale. The exhaustion in her body felt bone deep, but beneath it was something else, something that felt like air after drowning. Amira stirred, a soft sigh escaping as she blinked into the sunlight. Camille's heart, as always, pulled toward her, and she set the cold coffee aside, rising to kneel beside her daughter. "Good morning, baby," she whispered, her voice warm and low. Amira rubbed her eyes, her small body unfolding slowly as she sat up. There was something in her expression. Lighter, softer. "Morning, Mom," she said, her voice still thick with sleep, but easy in a way that it hadn't been for too long. Camille brushed a curl from Amira's cheek, her thumb sweeping gently across smooth skin. No redness, no bruises, no shadow. "How do you feel?" Amira's answer came quietly but with certainty. "Better." Camille's chest, tight for so many days, eased, and she pulled her daughter into a soft embrace, pressing her lips to the crown of her head. "Me too," she whispered. "Me too." The day unfolded slowly, but with a kind of peace that felt foreign and precious. They made pancakes together, Amira carefully flipping them, her tongue peeking out in concentration while Camille supervised, laughter light between them when a pancake landed folded instead of flat. Camille's phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Anna. "The order is official. He can't come near you or Amira. If he tries, we'll handle it. You're safe." Safe. The word sat in Camille's chest, unfamiliar and fragile but solid. She replied with a simple, heartfelt thank you. The apartment, which had felt like a cage during the storm of hearings and threats, now felt like a haven. Camille threw open the windows, letting the fresh spring air pour in, sweeping away the stale echoes of fear. Amira sat by the window with her sketch pad, her pencil moving lightly, and Camille, passing by, paused. She tilted her head. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Amira smiled softly without lifting her eyes from the page. "Just something new." Camille leaned closer and saw the beginnings of a drawing. Two figures holding hands beneath a wide, bright sky. No shadows, no cold edges, just warmth. Her throat tightened, and she ran a gentle hand over Amira's curls. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice thick with something too full to name. The doorbell rang, a sudden chime that made Camille's body tense, old instincts flaring before she could stop them. Her hand paused mid-air, but then Amira's small fingers slipped into hers, grounding her. "It's okay, Mom," Amira said softly. "We're safe." Camille's heart swelled, and she gave her daughter's hand a gentle squeeze before rising. She checked the peephole. Nicole's face, warm and familiar, greeted her from the other side. The door swung open, and Nicole immediately pulled Camille into a tight hug. "Hey, warrior," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Camille exhaled, her body sagging into the embrace that felt like home. "Hey." Nicole pulled back just enough to study her friend's face. "How are you?" Camille's lips curled in something soft and real. "Breathing. Finally." Nicole's eyes flicked past her to Amira, who waved from her spot by the window. "And how's my favorite artist?" Amira grinned. "Drawing. Wanna see?" Nicole stepped inside, her heels clicking lightly on the hardwood as she crossed to the window. She studied the sketch and nodded with an exaggerated, thoughtful hum. "You've got real talent. Maybe I'll commission something for my office." Amira giggled. "I charge a lot." Nicole gasped, hand to her chest. "A little entrepreneur. I'll have to negotiate hard." The warmth of the exchange filled the room, and Camille, leaning against the kitchen counter, felt it settle into the cracks of her heart, the cracks that had been shattered open but were slowly, surely knitting back together. Nicole turned back, her voice softening. "So, what's next?" Camille's gaze dropped briefly to her hand, to the empty place where Andrew's ring had once been. She felt no loss, only relief, only freedom. She straightened, her eyes meeting Nicole's with a clarity that felt new and whole. "Next," she said firmly, "is ours, me and Amira. No shadows, no fear, just life." Nicole's smile was bright and proud. "Then let's make it a damn good one." That evening, when the sky turned dusky and soft, Camille and Amira sat together on the small balcony. The city murmured quietly around them, and the air smelled of spring, fresh and full of promise. Amira, nestled against Camille's side, spoke softly. "Will he come back?" Camille's arms tightened protectively. "No, baby, he won't. And even if he tried, he'd never get near you. Ever." Amira was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, "I was scared, Mom." Camille's voice broke on the edges, raw but strong. "I know, sweetheart. Me too. But we're okay now, and we're together. That's all that matters." Amira's small voice, threaded with certainty, answered, "I believe you." The last of the day slipped beyond the horizon, and the stars blinked into the sky one by one. Camille felt the cool air brush against her skin, felt Amira's warmth beside her, and for the first time in so long, she felt it fully. Freedom. No more looking over her shoulder, no more weighing every word or watching for cracks in a perfect mask. The fight was over, and they had won. Not without cost, not without scars. But they had won. Camille lifted her face to the night sky, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she let the air fill her lungs without fear. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was theirs, and that was everything. Beside her, Amira's fingers slipped into her hand, and together they sat beneath the endless sky, their hearts steady, their bond unbreakable. Free. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more. Check out our other videos for more powerful and captivating stories. And feel free to share this video with your friends. See you in the next one.